Snow fell thick enough to swallow the abandoned city. Shattered windows stood like dead men's eyes. On the radio frequency, a private's voice trembled. "We're surrounded." They lay trapped at the frozen intersection, ammunition running low, hands stiffening. On the top floor of a half-collapsed building, she lay still, the only female sniper. Nobody believed she could change anything, until the entire city went silent after one shot. The city had no name anymore. What it once was, a trading hub, a place where families raised children, had been erased by 8 months of continuous fighting. Now, it was just grid reference 47 Delta on the tactical map, a series of broken coordinates where men came to die. Corporal Marcus Webb pressed his back against frozen concrete, feeling the cold seep through 3 layers of gear. Around him, 9 other soldiers breathed clouds of vapor into the gray afternoon. The snowfall was getting worse. Visibility down to 50 meters, maybe less. Still no response from command. Lieutenant Owen Hayes said, his voice flat on the squad channel. He was 28 but looked 40. That's what 3 deployments did. Extraction window closed 2 hours ago. Webb watched the intersection through his rifle scope. 4 streets converged here, each one a killing corridor. Burned-out vehicles formed makeshift barriers, their metal frames twisted like broken bones. Somewhere under the fresh snow were mines, anti-personnel devices waiting for pressure. Nobody knew the patterns anymore. The original maps were worthless. "Movement, northwest rooftop, private first class," Derek Sutton whispered. He was the youngest, 21, still believing he'd make it home. Possible spotter. Hayes didn't move his head. Confirmed. They know we're pinned. The enemy controlled the high ground. All of it. Every apartment block, every office tower still standing. The squad had made a critical error 2 hours ago, advancing through what seemed like an open corridor, only to discover it was a carefully prepared trap. Now they occupied the ground floor of a destroyed municipal building, surrounded on 3 sides, with winter darkness coming in 90 minutes. Webb's ammunition count, 4 magazines left, 30 rounds each. Sutton had 3, Hayes had 5, but he was sharing. The machine gunner, Sergeant Paul Jennings, had maybe 200 rounds for the M240. After that, they'd be throwing rocks. Radio's dying, the communications specialist, Lance Corporal Amy Chen, said quietly. She was hunched over the equipment, trying to coax life from failing batteries. "We've got maybe 20 minutes of transmission time. 20 minutes to call for help that wasn't coming." The temperature had dropped to 14 degrees Fahrenheit. With wind chill, it felt like 0. Webb's fingers were losing sensation despite the gloves. He flexed them mechanically, maintaining circulation, maintaining function. That's what training taught you. Break everything down into mechanical steps. Don't think about the bigger picture. Don't think about how you got here. "Incoming!" someone shouted. The first round punched through the window frame 6 inches from Sutton's head. The young private dropped flat, instinct overriding thought. More shots followed, precise, measured, coming from multiple directions. Suppressive fire designed to keep them down, keep them contained. Hayes keyed his radio. "All positions hold. Do not return fire unless you have a clear target." Ammunition discipline. The last rule when you're surrounded and outgunned. Make every shot count because you might only get 10 more. Webb counted the enemy firing positions. At least 3 confirmed sniper nests. Probably more. The opposition had time to prepare, time to position their best shooters, time to create overlapping fields of fire. This wasn't chaos. This was execution. "Sir," Chen said, voice tight, "I've got someone on auxiliary channel. Says she's our support element." Hayes frowned. "What support element?" "Didn't know we had one either." The lieutenant moved to Chen's position, took the handset. His expression didn't change as he listened, but Webb saw the slight tension in his jaw. Whatever he was hearing, he didn't like it. When Hayes finished, he looked at his team. "Apparently, we've got a sharpshooter attached. Just her. Already in position, somewhere in the operational area." "Where?" Jennings asked. She wouldn't say. "Operational security." Sutton made a sound that might have been a laugh. "One shooter's going to make a difference?" Nobody answered, because they all knew the real question nobody wanted to ask. If she was so good, why wasn't she with a dedicated sniper team? The snow kept falling. The city kept waiting. And somewhere in the ruins, she was watching. Technical Sergeant Rachel Thorne had been in position for 6 hours before the squad walked into the trap. She'd seen it coming from 300 meters away and 80 feet up. But her orders were clear. Observe and report. Not engage unless absolutely necessary. Not reveal her position unless the situation became critical. Now it was critical. She lay prone on the 5th floor of what used to be an insurance company headquarters. The roof was gone, taken by artillery weeks ago. The walls were pocked with bullet holes. Every window frame was empty. But the floor was stable. She had 3 escape routes mapped, and most importantly, she had clear sightlines to 7 different sectors of the intersection below. Her rifle was a modified M24, older than most of the soldiers downstairs. The scope had been zeroed so many times the adjustment knobs were worn smooth. The stock was scuffed, the barrel darkened by carbon scoring. It wasn't pretty. It didn't need to be. Through her scope, Thorne watched the squad regroup after the suppressive fire. They were disciplined. That was good. Panic killed faster than bullets. She saw Hayes trying to organize a defensive perimeter, saw Chen working the dying radio, saw the others checking ammunition and preparing for a siege they probably wouldn't survive. Her earpiece crackled. Hawk 7, this is Overwatch. Status? She kept her voice barely above a whisper. Overwatch. Hawk 7, pinned element is 9 personnel, approximately 30% combat effective, surrounded by estimated 12 to 15 hostile positions. Weather deteriorating. Visibility at 50 meters and dropping. Can you provide support? Negative recommended. Range to priority targets exceeds optimal engagement distance given current conditions. Wind is gusting, snow is interfering with optics. Miss probability is unacceptably high. A pause. Understood. Continue observation. Extraction assets are grounded due to weather. Ground reinforcements are 6 hours out. Minimum 6 hours. These soldiers didn't have 6 hours. They had maybe 90 minutes, before full darkness, before the enemy decided to move in and finish this. Thorne did the math in her head. The primary enemy command position was approximately 840 meters from her location. In perfect conditions, that shot was difficult but achievable. In current conditions, falling snow, variable wind, temperature affecting ballistics, target partially concealed, it was nearly impossible. Nearly. She'd been attached to this operation 48 hours ago, a last-minute addition when intelligence suggested enemy sniper activity in the area. No time for integration with the ground team. No time for trust building or proving herself. Just drop her in, let her do what she did, extract her when it was done. That's how it always worked. She was a specialist, not part of the team, a tool kept separate until needed. Some commanders appreciated having a precision shooter on call. Others resented her presence, saw her as a reminder that they couldn't handle everything themselves. Lieutenant Hayes seemed like the latter. His tone on the radio had been cool, professional, skeptical. She didn't blame him. She was an unknown variable in an already desperate equation. Below, another burst of gunfire. The enemy was testing the perimeter, probing for weak points. Thorne tracked the muzzle flash to a 4th-floor window in a building south of the intersection. Not the priority target, just harassment fire. Her finger rested outside the trigger guard. Patient, waiting for the order that might not come in time. The snow fell harder. It happened at 1,437 hours. Thorne was tracking a suspected spotter in the northeast sector when she heard Hayes' voice on the command channel. Bravo team, prepare to displace to secondary position on my mark. Charlie team will provide covering fire. She went rigid. No, that was wrong. The secondary position Hayes was referencing put his people directly in the kill zone of at least 2 confirmed sniper nests. They'd be exposed for 15 seconds during the movement. Might as well paint targets on their backs. Overwatch, Hawk 7, she transmitted urgently. Advise against planned maneuver. Enemy has overlapping coverage on that vector. High probability of casualties. Hawk 7, Overwatch copies, relaying to ground element. But it was too late. Through her scope, Thorne saw 3 soldiers break from cover, moving fast and low toward the building across the street. Exactly as Hayes had ordered, the first shot came from the northeast. She saw Corporal Webb go down, clutching his leg. The second shot came from a different direction, west-northwest. One of the covering team, a soldier she didn't know by name, dropped behind a concrete barrier. Not hit, just pinned. Then the coordinated fire began. 3, 4, 5 different positions opening up simultaneously. The enemy had been waiting for exactly this moment, waiting for desperation to force a mistake. Hayes was shouting commands, trying to suppress the hostile fire, trying to get Webb to safety. But every time someone moved, another burst of gunfire forced them back down. They were trapped worse than before, and now they had a casualty bleeding in the middle of the intersection. Thorne's heart rate didn't change. Her breathing didn't accelerate. This was the moment when physiology mattered most, When the body wanted to flood with adrenaline and the mind needed to stay crystalline and cold, she keyed her radio. Overwatch. Hawk 7 requesting weapons-free authority. Hawk 7, stand by. Negative. Overwatch. I need authorization now. Pinned element has casualties and is in immediate danger of being overrun. Hawk 7. Engagement range is outside approved parameters for current weather conditions. I'm aware of the parameters. Requesting exception. Another pause. Longer this time. Somewhere in a command center miles away, someone was making calculations. Risk versus reward. Mission success versus acceptable losses. The math of sending people to die. Hawk 7. You are weapons free. Priority target is command element, bearing 047 degrees from your position, approximately 800 meters. Building with blue facade, 4th floor. Thorne had already found it, had been tracking it for the last 20 minutes. She could see the faint shadow of movement behind the shattered window. The enemy commander, or his radio operator. Someone important enough that killing them might disrupt the entire ambush. The problem was the shot itself. 843 meters, she corrected mentally. Wind was gusting from the northwest at approximately 15 miles per hour, but the snow made exact measurement impossible. Temperature was dropping, which would affect the trajectory. The target was partially concealed, offering maybe a 6-inch window of opportunity, and she'd have one chance. One shot before they identified her position and returned fire. Below, medic Private Elena Vasquez was trying to reach Webb, crawling through the snow under covering fire. She was exposed, vulnerable, and running out of time. Hayes' voice came through on the general frequency, tight with controlled panic. All elements, we are combat ineffective. Cannot hold this position past nightfall. Repeat, cannot hold. Thorne removed her glove. Let the freezing air touch her trigger finger. She needed the sensitivity, needed to feel the exact pressure point. Her hand went numb immediately, but that didn't matter. Sensation was temporary. The shot was permanent. Hawk 7 engaging, she transmitted. Nobody responded. Nobody believed it would matter. Thorne blocked out the radio chatter, blocked out the distant sounds of gunfire, blocked out everything except the physics of the shot. Wind speed, variable. Call it 15 miles per hour with gusts to 20. Direction, northwest, meaning crosswind component plus slight headwind. The snow was heavier now, each flake a tiny deviation in trajectory. At 800 meters, those deviations added up. She adjusted the scope elevation. 2 minutes of angle up from her 800-meter zero. Then compensated for air density, cold air was more dense, which meant the bullet would fly straighter but slightly slower. Range to target demanded she account for the Earth's rotation. Not much at this distance, but at the edge of accuracy, everything mattered. Breathing. That was next. She controlled her respiratory rhythm, slowing it down until each breath took 8 seconds. 4 in, hold, 4 out. The hold was when she'd take the shot. When her chest was completely still, when her body was a stable platform, her mind went to muscle memory. 17 years of training, thousands of rounds downrange. She'd made shots like this before. Not many, but enough to know it was possible. Possible wasn't the same as probable, but it was all she had. The memory came unbidden. The range instructor at Fort Benning, 7 years ago, standing behind her during advanced training, his voice calm, instructional. A shot like this isn't about confidence. It's about certainty. You need to know, not think. The difference is in your body, not your mind. She'd asked what he meant. Your body already knows how to make this shot. Your mind just needs to get out of the way. Through the scope, she watched the target window. The shadow moved again. Someone checking on the ambush progress. Someone giving orders. She couldn't see a face. Couldn't identify rank or role. Just the shape of a human being, 843 meters away, who had ordered this trap, who had positioned the snipers, who was responsible for Webb bleeding in the snow. One shot. If she missed, the enemy would scatter, change positions, adapt their tactics. The element of surprise, her only real advantage, would be gone. The squad below would die slowly, pinned and picked apart until ammunition ran out or darkness gave the enemy the confidence to assault. If she hit, maybe the command structure would fracture. Maybe the ambush would fall apart. Maybe. Too many maybes. But maybes were better than certain death. She toggled her radio one last time. Hawk 7 to pinned element. When I fire, be ready to move on my mark. Do not hesitate. Window will be narrow. Hayes' response was clipped. Understood. All elements stand by. Thorne settled into the shot. Cheek welled against the stock, slight pressure pulling the rifle into her shoulder. Eye aligned perfectly with the scope's center. The world reduced to a circle of magnified vision, everything outside that circle irrelevant. The wind gusted. She waited for it to settle. It didn't matter that her finger was going numb. Didn't matter that her heart rate was elevated from the altitude and cold. Didn't matter that 9 people were depending on a shot that was statistically unlikely to succeed. She exhaled slowly, held, found the stillness between heartbeats, and pressed the trigger. The rifle recoiled. The sound echoed across the frozen city. Through the scope, Thorne watched the bullets trace through the falling snow, a barely visible disturbance in the air. 843 meters, time of flight, approximately 1.2 seconds. She didn't blink, didn't breathe, watched the target window with absolute focus. The shadow dropped. Just like that. No dramatic collapse. No visible impact. Just there one moment, gone the next. The shot had found its mark through snow, wind, and 800 meters of hostile territory. But Thorne didn't celebrate. Didn't allow even a moment of satisfaction. She was already scanning for secondary threats. Already repositioning slightly in case return fire came her way. The first rule of sniping: never stay static after revealing your position. Below, nothing happened. The gunfire continued. The enemy snipers kept their suppressive patterns. Nobody had noticed yet. That's how modern combat worked, one shot among hundreds. One death in a battle that had already killed dozens. Then the radio traffic changed. An enemy transmission, intercepted on the monitoring frequency. Chen's translation equipment picked it up. Station 4, respond. Station 4, report status. Silence. Any station. Confirm Station 4 is operational. More silence. Station 4 is down. Repeat. Station 4 is down. Switch to alternate command authority. Thorne keyed her mic. Hawk 7 to pinned element. Command element is neutralized. Stand by for enemy confusion. Prepare to exploit. Through her scope, she watched the intersection. The enemy fire was still heavy, but something had changed. The coordination was gone. Different positions were firing at different rhythms, not synchronized anymore. The careful ambush was becoming just random harassment. Hayes must have noticed too. His voice came through, steady despite the circumstances. All elements, on my mark, suppressive fire to sectors 2 and 5. Medic, that's your window to reach Webb. Copy, Vasquez responded. 3, 2, 1, mark. The squad opened up. Controlled bursts, not panic fire. Jennings's machine gun hammered away at the northwest sector. Rifles cracked from multiple positions. For 10 seconds, the Americans owned the intersection. Vasquez sprinted. Low, fast, professional. She covered the 15 meters to Webb in 4 seconds, dropped beside him, and immediately started trauma assessment. Through her scope, Thorne could see the medic's hands moving with practiced efficiency. Tourniquet application, wound packing, morphine administration. Another enemy transmission. All stations. Who has operational authority? We need coordination. Nobody answered. The command structure had decapitated. Station 4, whoever they were, had been the node holding the ambush together. Without them, the enemy fighters were independent units without unified command. Thorne shifted her aim to a secondary target. Northeast sector, 3rd floor. The spotter she'd identified earlier. Range, 460 meters. Much easier shot. She controlled her breathing, found her rhythm, and fired. The spotter disappeared from the window. Additional hostile down, she transmitted. Northeast sector no longer has eyes on the intersection. Hayes' response was immediate. Charlie team, displaced to secondary position, now. This time, no shots came. 3 soldiers moved across open ground without taking fire. They reached cover, consolidated, and set up a new defensive line. The squad's perimeter had just expanded by 30 meters. The tide was turning. Not one, they were still surrounded, still outnumbered, still running low on ammunition. But the suffocating pressure had eased. The enemy was reacting now, not acting, and in combat, that made all the difference. But Thorne knew this wasn't over. The enemy would adapt. They'd establish a new command hierarchy. They'd reorganize. She'd bought Hayes and his people time, maybe 20 minutes. After that, the pressure would return, unless she kept shooting. She scanned for the next target. The city had gone quiet. Everyone waiting. Everyone wondering what would happen next. The snow kept falling. It took the enemy 12 minutes to realize what was happening. 12 minutes of confusion, intercepted radio calls, frantic attempts to reorganize. 12 minutes of watching their carefully planned ambush fall apart. Thorne used that time to eliminate 4 more priority targets. The second shot took out an enemy machine gun position covering the western approach. Range: 600 meters. The gunner had been firing in controlled bursts, pinning Hayes's left flank. After Thorne's shot, the gun went silent. The third shot neutralized a forward observer who'd been calling fire adjustments to the sniper teams. Range: 520 meters. Without that observer, the enemy's information network collapsed further. The fourth shot was into a building's second floor, where she'd identified what looked like a secondary command post. Range: 715 meters. She couldn't confirm the kill, but the radio traffic suggested she'd hit someone important. The enemy's attempts at reorganization stopped entirely. The fifth shot was pure tactical disruption. She aimed at a structural weak point in a building the enemy was using for cover, a damaged support column already stressed from previous fighting. The shot wasn't meant to kill. It was meant to bring down 15 feet of concrete facade. It worked. The collapse sent up a plume of dust and debris, cut off one of the enemy's retreat routes, and created enough chaos that two more hostile positions abandoned their posts entirely. Hayes's voice came through, and for the first time there was something other than exhaustion in it. Hawk 7, multiple enemy elements are withdrawing from the eastern sector. Hostiles are breaking contact. Confirmed, Thorne replied. They've lost command cohesion. Recommend you exploit immediately. Already moving. Charlie team is securing the eastern corridor. Once we have it, we can establish a hard point and call for evacuation. Through her scope, Thorne watched the intersection transform. What had been a killing zone 30 minutes ago was now American-controlled territory. The squad was moving with purpose, covering each other, establishing proper fields of fire. Webb was being evacuated to a sheltered position. Vasquez had him stabilized. The enemy fire had reduced to sporadic shots from distant positions. Harassment, not suppression. They'd lost their will to maintain the ambush, lost too many key personnel, lost their advantage. A new voice came on the command channel. Older, authoritative, clearly senior to Hayes. Ground element. This is actual. Status report. Actual, ground element. We have successfully broken enemy encirclement. 1 casualty, stable condition. Currently establishing defensive perimeter for extraction. Enemy forces have withdrawn from immediate area. Copy all. Aviation assets are now available. Extraction in 40 minutes. How did you manage the breakout? Hayes paused. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Careful. Actual. We received precision fire support from an attached sharpshooter. Multiple confirmed enemy Kia at extended range. She neutralized their command structure. Another pause. Longer this time. Sharpshooter. This is actual. Call sign? Thorne kept scanning the area, still professional. Hawk 7, sir. Hawk 7, what was your engagement range? Primary target was 843 meters. Subsequent targets ranged from 460 to 715 meters. All engagements conducted in adverse weather conditions with variable wind. The silence on the radio was absolute. Nobody spoke. Even the breathing seemed to stop. Finally. Understood. Report to my position immediately upon extraction. That tone. She knew what it meant. The extraction helicopters arrived 38 minutes later, their rotors churning the falling snow into a blinding whiteout. Thorne waited until the entire squad was loaded before she left her position. Protocol. The mission wasn't complete until everyone was safe. She descended the building using her pre-planned escape route down a damaged stairwell, through a ground floor window, across a courtyard covered in debris. She moved quickly but methodically, still maintaining tactical awareness. The enemy had withdrawn, but that didn't mean they were gone. When she reached the landing zone, the squad was already aboard. She was the last one in. A crew chief pulled her into the helicopter's cargo bay, and they lifted off immediately, rising above the ruined city into the gray sky. Inside the helicopter, 9 pairs of eyes watched her. Thorne secured her rifle, removed her cold weather gear, and sat down. Said nothing. There was nothing to say. She'd done her job. They'd survived. The mission continued. It was Sutton who broke the silence, shouting over the rotor noise. That was you? All of it? She nodded once. 800 meters? In that weather? Another nod. The young private looked at the other soldiers, then back at her. That's not possible. We trained on extreme range shooting. Nobody makes those shots consistently, especially not in conditions like that. I didn't make them consistently, Thorne replied. Her voice was level, factual. I made them once. That's different. Jennings, the machine gunner, leaned forward. He was older than the others, probably in his mid-30s, combat veteran written all over him. I've worked with scout snipers before. Marine Corps, Army Rangers. Nobody talks about 800-meter shots like they're routine. They're not routine, Thorne said. They're extremely difficult and require optimal conditions. Today, conditions were not optimal, but the alternative was letting you die. So I took the shots. Hayes was sitting across from her, watching with an expression she couldn't quite read. Assessment, maybe, or recalculation. He'd dismissed her earlier, written her off as a token asset who wouldn't contribute meaningfully. Now he was confronting the reality that she'd saved his entire team. Why didn't you tell us you could do that? He asked. You didn't ask. And command doesn't typically disclose specialist capabilities until they're necessary. Operational security. Operational security, Hayes repeated. We were dying down there. Operational security could have gotten us killed. Thorne met his eyes. I engaged the moment I had authorization and a reasonable chance of success. Before that, revealing my capabilities would have accomplished nothing except making you dependent on a resource that might not have been effective. Better to let you execute your own tactics until precision fire became necessary. It was true, but it was also cold, clinical. She could see the others processing that, understanding that she'd watched them struggle, watched them make mistakes, watched Webb get shot, all while calculating probabilities and waiting for the optimal moment to intervene. Chen, the communications specialist, spoke up. I don't think you understand what you did down there. We were finished, done, and then the city just stopped shooting. The enemy command structure collapsed, Thorne explained. That's what happens when you remove the coordinating element from a distributed network. Individual units lose cohesion and either withdraw or act independently. Basic tactical theory. Basic, Vasquez muttered. Right. The helicopter banked, heading toward the forward operating base. Below, the city disappeared into the snow. In a few hours, it would be dark. New fighters would move in. New ambushes would be set. The war continued regardless of who won today. Thorne checked her rifle again. Routine maintenance, making sure everything was secured for landing. Hayes was still watching her. When we get back, Actual wants to see you. She nodded. She'd expected that. Colonel Frank Morrison was 53 years old and had been in combat operations for 30 years. He'd seen every type of soldier, the brave, the cowardly, the competent, the incompetent, the lucky, and the doomed. He'd given medals and written letters to families. He'd made decisions that sent people to die and decisions that saved them. He'd never seen anything like Technical Sergeant Rachel Thorne's after-action report. She stood at attention in his office, a converted storage room with maps on the walls and a space heater fighting against the cold. Her uniform was clean but worn. Her expression was neutral, professional, unremarkable. If you saw her on the street, you'd never guess she'd just executed one of the most difficult shots in modern military history. At ease, Morrison said. Sit down. She sat. Posture still perfect. Morrison looked at the report again. 5 confirmed enemy KIA at ranges between 460 and 843 meters. Adverse weather conditions. Limited visibility. Gusting crosswinds. 1 shot, 1 kill. Repeated 5 times. No misses. No wasted ammunition. This report, he said slowly, is going to cause problems. Because nobody's going to believe it. We'll have to verify everything. Examine the scene. Confirm the ranges. Reconstruct the weather conditions. There will be questions about the equipment, about your training, about whether this is even physically possible. It was possible, sir. I have the verification equipment data if needed. Oh, I know it was possible. I've already spoken with Lieutenant Hayes. He watched the enemy positions go silent one by one. Watched his people survive because you made shots that shouldn't work. Morrison set the report down. What I'm trying to understand is how you stayed calm enough to make them. Training, sir. And necessity. The squad needed precision fire support. I provided it. That's not an answer, Sergeant. That's a job description. Thorne was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, but no less controlled. Fear is useful in combat. It keeps you alert, but it can't be allowed to interfere with function. When I'm behind the rifle, I'm not thinking about success or failure. I'm thinking about wind speed, elevation, breathing rhythm, the mathematics of the shot. There's no room for emotion in that process. Morrison studied her. He'd commanded soldiers like this before, the ones who'd found a way to shut down the parts of their brain that generated doubt, the ones who could function in situations that would break normal people. They were invaluable in combat and often struggled everywhere else. The shot that broke the ambush, he said. 843 meters in snowfall. What was your hit probability? Approximately 18%, sir. And you took it anyway. The alternative was watching 9 soldiers die with 100% probability. 18% was better than 0. Morrison stood, walked around the desk. Thorne rose to attention automatically. He didn't say anything at first. Just looked at her, this thin, unremarkable woman who'd saved 9 lives today with a skill set most people didn't know existed. Then he saluted. Full military honors. The kind of salute you gave to someone who'd done something extraordinary. Thorne returned it immediately, her movement crisp and exact. Dismissed, Sergeant. She turned and left. No wasted motion, no ceremony. Morrison sat back down and stared at the after-action report. 18%. She'd bet 9 lives on 18% and won. The squad was debriefing in the barracks when Thorne returned. They went quiet when she entered, which she expected. Soldiers always had questions after they'd been pulled back from the edge. Questions they didn't quite know how to ask. She stowed her gear methodically, checking each piece of equipment, noting what needed maintenance. The rifle would require a full cleaning cycle. The scope needed to be re-zeroed after the temperature swings. The cold weather gear had some minor tears. Hey, Sutton said finally, we're about to grab food. You coming? I need to finish equipment maintenance. It can wait an hour, can't it? Thorne looked at him. He was young, probably his first deployment, still figuring out how military life worked, still believing that surviving meant you'd made friends. No, she said, it can't. But Vasquez intercepted her before she could return to the maintenance bay. The medic was direct, no preamble. Webb's going to be fine. Clean through and through on the leg. No bone damage, no arterial involvement. He'll be stateside in a week for recovery. Good. He wants to thank you. Said if you hadn't started shooting when you did, he'd have bled out before I could reach him. I was doing my job. Yeah. Vasquez crossed her arms. That's what everyone says. Just doing my job. But here's the thing, your job was observing, reporting. You weren't even supposed to engage unless absolutely necessary. You could have stayed hidden, stayed safe, and let us figure it out ourselves. You wouldn't have figured it out. You'd have died. Exactly. Which means you made a choice. You chose to take those shots, knowing they were dangerous, knowing you might miss, knowing the enemy would return fire. That's not just a job, that's a decision. Thorne was quiet for a moment. She didn't usually have conversations like this, didn't usually need to explain her thought process. But Vasquez had saved Webb's life just as surely as she had. Maybe the medic deserved honesty. When I'm in position, Thorne said slowly, I see everything. Every movement, every threat, every opportunity. I watch people make mistakes, and I can't warn them in time. I watch people get hurt, and I can't help them. All I can do is wait for the moment when my specific skill set becomes relevant, when the shot becomes necessary. And today it was necessary. Today it was necessary, Thorne agreed. If I'd hesitated, if I'd waited for perfect conditions, you'd all be dead. So I took the shot with whatever probability of success I had, because something is always better than nothing. Hayes appeared from the other side of the barracks. He'd been listening, Thorne realized. He walked over, and his expression was different from the helicopter. Less guarded. More. Something. Respect, maybe. I owe you an apology, he said. When Chen told me we had a sharpshooter attached, I thought it was a waste of resources. Thought we didn't need specialized support for what should have been a routine patrol. I was wrong. You weren't wrong, Thorne replied. In 90% of scenarios, you wouldn't have needed me. You were correct to prioritize your own team's capabilities and not rely on an unknown asset. But that other 10% is why specialists exist. Hayes nodded slowly. We're putting you in for a commendation, Morrison agreed. What you did today, people are going to study that in tactical courses. They're going to ask how it's possible. Thorne picked up her rifle. It's possible because someone trained me to do it, because I practiced constantly, and because when it mattered, I didn't think about whether it was possible. I just did it. She headed toward the maintenance bay. Behind her, she heard Sutton's voice. If she hadn't been here, nobody finished the sentence. They didn't need to. 3 days later, the squad was reassigned to a different sector. New coordinates, new mission parameters, new tactical problems to solve. That's how military operations worked. You survived one crisis and immediately prepared for the next. Thorne was reassigned too. Different unit, different area of operations. She packed her gear in silence, loaded it into a transport vehicle, and left the forward operating base at dawn. No ceremony, no farewells. That's how her assignments usually went. But before she left, Hayes found her at the transport staging area. "Wanted to catch you before you disappeared," he said. "Got word from command. Your after-action report was verified. All 5 shots confirmed. They're calling it one of the longest-range combat engagements in the war so far. Thorne secured the last of her equipment. They'll make it sound more impressive than it was. Maybe, but we both know what it really was." Hayes extended his hand. "Thank you for what you did, for not giving up on us." She shook his hand. "Brief, professional. You would have done the same." "No," Hayes said quietly. "I wouldn't have. I couldn't have. That's why you're the one who made those shots and I'm the one who got rescued." The transport engine started. The driver was waiting. Thorne climbed into the back of the vehicle, where her rifle case was already secured. As they pulled away from the base, she looked back once. Hayes was still standing there, watching her leave. Behind him, the morning sun was trying to break through the clouds. It wouldn't succeed, more snow was coming. The weather reports predicted another storm system moving in, heavier than the last one. Somewhere out there, men were moving into position for the next fight. New snipers, new ambushes, new desperate situations that would require someone to take an impossible shot. Thorne checked her rifle case one more time, made sure everything was secure for the drive. In 2 days, she'd be at a new forward operating base, attached to a new unit, working with new soldiers who wouldn't know her capabilities until the moment came. That was fine. She preferred it that way. Preferred to be underestimated, to be dismissed, to be the specialist nobody thought about until everything went wrong. Because when everything went wrong, that's when her work mattered. Her phone had one message, forwarded from Morrison's office, a transcript of an intercepted enemy communication from the day of the ambush. Someone had translated it and flagged it for her attention. "Unknown sniper. Female, we think. Impossible ranges. Command says avoid sector until she's gone." Thorne read it twice, then deleted it. The enemy knew she existed now. That would make future operations more difficult. They'd be more careful, more concealed, less predictable. Good. She preferred challenges. The transport drove through snow-covered terrain, heading toward the next assignment. Thorne closed her eyes, not sleeping, just resting, conserving energy for whatever came next. In her mind, she was already planning, already calculating ranges, wind speeds, elevation adjustments, already preparing for the moment when someone would need a shot that shouldn't be possible. Because that's what she did. That's what she was. The vehicle hit a bump. She opened her eyes, checked the rifle case again. Still secure. Outside, the snow was falling harder. The driver turned on the wipers, but they barely helped. Visibility was dropping to dangerous levels. Thorne watched the white landscape roll past. Somewhere out there, people were fighting. People were dying. People were surviving against impossible odds. And somewhere, someone was watching through a scope, waiting for the one shot that would change everything. The snow kept falling. The war continued, and Rachel Thorne disappeared into the storm, ready for the next impossible moment.